Hello and welcome back to Equity, TechCrunch's podcast about the business of startups. I'm Kirsten Korosec, transportation editor here at TechCrunch, and this is the episode where we bring on industry experts to help us explore a trend in the tech world and dive deep. Today we are joined by Jiten Behl, partner at Eclipse Ventures. Jiten's been on both sides of the table. First, scaling a hard tech unicorn from the inside as an early employee and the chief growth officer at Rivian, and now deploying capital into the next generation of industrial and mobility startups over at Eclipse. So he has views on where the opportunities are in this interesting moment for EVs, manufacturing, automation, dare I say even AI. Jiten, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's nice to be here.
So I saw you, what was it? It feels like forever ago, but it was, I think, only about 6 weeks ago at the Also event, which is one of the companies that Eclipse has recently backed. Also, for those who don't know, is the micromobility startup and spinout from Rivian. And I would love for you to give us a little bit of insight into how that whole deal came together, because obviously you have a connection to Rivian. But I'm assuming that that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to invest in everything that Rivian does. So how did that deal come together?
It's a great question. I was at Rivian from the very early days, joined the company in 2015 when a few of us could fit in a conference room. We had no technology, no product, no suppliers, no manufacturing facility, and also no team. So it was really a clean sheet back in 2015. But we were very convicted that there is this massive wave of electrification that was ahead of us, and the consumers will need a lot more choices for that wave of, I would say, innovation to take over. At that point, Tesla was just starting out, but it was clear that the consumers were responding positively to the design, to the technology, to just the innovation in the product that hadn't seen innovation for decades. Fast forward to 2021, when we launched our first set of products, the truck, the SUV, and the van. One of the realizations that we had in the management team was that when you're trying to build a car company, there are so many variables that you have to balance. There are some variables that are, I would say, more deterministic. Hey, how do you design the product, the technology? How do you build a plant? How do you onboard suppliers? But then there are also a lot of, I would say, more obscure things, like how do you develop a brand? How do you make sure that this brand resonates with the end consumer? Why would they choose Rivian? Like, what about Rivian needs to speak to them? And what we realized was that the obscure elements, we got them really right. I mean, the brand really had a very unique, differentiated, fresh identity, which drew a lot of consumers towards the vehicles. We, of course, did not at that point realize that the more deterministic elements about launching a facility would be so hard. It was the time of COVID and supply chain hell and all of that. But on the back of the success of the brand, the question we asked ourselves was, such a great brand that we've built, but the price tag for our first products is high. And the next natural question was, what could we do, which is the smallest ticket item in terms of a product that can get people under the brand umbrella of Rivian. And from there, they can graduate to other products, including our SUVs and our truck. And we looked around, we felt that the micromobility space, which is a very huge market, was very underserved when it came to technology. It had the same symptoms that the car industry was suffering from, no little tech, no brand differentiation, no performance differentiation, terrible buying experience, ownership experience, but a market that was poised to grow massively, especially in the urban areas. And that was the, call it, birth of this idea on micromobility. And we started out with a stealth team inside the company. And then fast forward to a few years later, when I joined Eclipse, RJ and I were talking about it. And we realized that the opportunity is much bigger than keeping it constrained within the Rivian umbrella. we said that this is an opportunity for us to carve this out into an independent company and go after multiple geographies, multiple markets, and that's how that came about.
So, putting on your VC hat though for a minute, obviously you're very familiar with Rivian. You helped grow and build the company to what it is today. But are there still questions that you ask any company, even one that you're so closely associated with, and before Eclipse decides to put a considerable amount of money into, in this venture or any other ventures? Like what is your list that goes through your mind that brings you to the yes column, when you might
Yeah.
be wavering, even if it is a company or founders that you're very familiar with?
I mentioned that building companies in the physical world or physical space is like balancing a multivariable equation. It has R&D, it has supply chain, manufacturing, logistics, customers. And when I meet founders that are trying to build a company in the physical world, there are two things that I'm looking for. Number one is a sense of being hyper optimistic. You're starting with nothing, with a clean sheet, and you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money before you could sell your first product, first dollars of revenues. You have to spend more money to generate first dollars of cash flow. So you really need to be optimistic about this journey. But at the same time, you have to be very realistic about it as well. You're not going to get this done in 1 year. You're not going to get this done with a few $1 million. And sometimes those are contradictory, being optimistic and realistic at the same time. But that is an important, I would say, mix of traits that we look for. And then you double click into the product category and you sort of look at it and say that does success here have limitless demand? Like you need to be make sure about the demand side of things, because you can figure out the supply only if there's demand on the other side. And I think that is actually a very important filter, which to me is the founder and the market, or the founder and the product fit. That I think gives us a lot of insights in the first meeting about a venture.
Well, I imagine though you're in Silicon Valley that finding the hyper optimistic or highly optimistic person is like they're everywhere. I think that's pretty fair to say. How common is it though that where you're seeing founders, maybe their idea isn't quite right, but where they actually combine those two first pieces, which is, very optimistic and driven, but also realistic. Is that pretty rare?
It is. I think you nailed it. I don't think there's dearth of hyper optimism around where we are, which is great. I love that. I was in that boat many years back, but being realistic about one, what is it going to take to build a company in this space? And number two, being humble about you don't know what you don't know. And there are so many variables to balance, like I mentioned, unlike not to sort of disparage building enterprise software, but the number of variables you need to account for are much lesser, much fewer valleys of death, as we call it in our world,
Yeah.
that you have to navigate. And I think that if someone has gone through one or two product cycles in the physical world, is is a very easy data point that they have probably discovered and navigated most of these valleys of death. If you've not gone through that, it becomes extremely difficult to really quantify what it is going to take and how do you need to adapt, how do you need to be proactive about things. Unlike, again, looking at the software world, you have folks that have just graduated out of college, have maybe worked for a couple of years and can build generational companies. We've seen that the VC space has seen that over the last 20, 25 years. It's not the case in the physical world. You need to have those war stories.
So why not? I mean, you make a really good point, which is while it's very common to see in sort of the lack of valley of death or very few, I'd say, constraints when it comes to launching some software products, especially these days in terms of enterprise software and software as a service, the margins are great. So why not go invest in that? I mean, what is it so appealing to you to go after the physical world, which is infinitely more difficult, much higher risk. The margins aren't always there. And the scale time really matches a lot of other deep tech because it may be years before certainly profits, but even revenue.
80% of the world's GDP is the physical world. We sometimes overlook that. A lot of innovation, a lot of VC dollars have been spent to, yeah, really make meaningful changes to our lives, but it is in a very small subset of the global GDP from that perspective. Number one. Number two, if you look at some of the unbelievable returns that have been generated in terms of generational companies that have been built in our lifetime, they're all people that have built something physical or something associated with that. There is an insight there, and that's because you can have a much bigger impact on the economy and on the society if you go after the largest chunk of the global GDP. When we were building Rivian, unfortunately, we did not have access to the venture capital portion of the capital stack. Like,
Yeah.
for reasons that you just summarized really well, that it was too hard, it used to take too long, the risks were much higher, and there was much easier ways to earn your returns than hardware or than physical space. But there has been changes that I've seen just during Rivian and post my time at Rivian, where the product cycles are shortening. And that is because of the, I would say, intersection of technology with the physical world. You're able to simulate things faster, you're able to get feedback faster, you're able to test faster, you're able to do quality control faster. And those are shortening the development cycles, and as a result, the capital needs, and as a result, the risk profile. And that is why I think we're all sort of living in this era where all the, I would say, venture dollars are now seeking opportunities in the physical world.
Yeah.
What a complete 180 just in a 10, 15-year time frame.
I will say, though, that Rivian was quite successful in raising quite a bit of strategic funding prior to going public. I think more than $10 billion, give or take. So it's certainly a success story there. But do you think that if Rivian were to be just getting started now, to your point, that because of maybe some tools that would help and just thinking has changed, that Rivian would have been able to raise even more money or have fewer constraints to raising that money? I mean, is that just such a distinct change? And is AI and the ability to use that to sort of empower companies to move faster? If you were to change the timeline, would it be different for Rivian? Would it have been easier?
I definitely think it would be easier. And there are two reasons for that. I think one, what we just discussed, which is around better technology and tools availability to overall shorten the life cycle of product development. And I think, Kirsten, there's a great example here. If you look at what Tesla did, when they launched their first three vehicles, I don't have the exact time frame in mind, but it was, I don't know, 9 or 10 years before they launched their Model S, Model X, and then the Model 3 platform. It took, that much amount of time. Rivian launched the truck, the SUV, and the van roughly in a 6-year time frame. So we already saw that shortening happening. So that's one aspect. The other one, when Tesla was built and when Rivian was built, we didn't have the luxury of a pre-existing supply chain to develop a new clean sheet EV platform. So without that, the only choice we had is, hey, we're going to build this on our own. And the vertical integration strategy had two phases. One was we wanted to do it because we felt it was differentiating. And the other one was we wanted to do it because we had to do it. There was no other option. Now, when you have to build every single brick of a wall, it takes capital, it takes time. I think companies that are being built today have the advantage that a lot of the supply chain, by virtue of some of these early breakout companies in automotive, has created supply chain options that they do not have to build everything in-house. So, put these two things together, good technology, good tools available, better and pre-existing supply chains available. Now you can see why you're seeing faster launches of products and line of sight to first revenues much quicker. And therefore, it draws more capital and it becomes a virtuous cycle as a result.
So that's interesting because, Rivian is so vertically integrated. But if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that because of how things have changed, companies can move much faster and they don't necessarily have to be vertically integrated. Is that sort of your premise?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there are certain areas where if you're not vertically integrating, I would question where does your moat lie or where does your differentiation lie. But certain areas where existing supply chains exist, where it is not necessarily a differentiating aspect for the end product, putting in capex dollars to build those capabilities at subscale is only going to make your product economically unviable. And it's going to take longer and it's going to take more capital. So that's definitely a lens that we use here at Eclipse to evaluate the product strategies and the vertical integration plans of these founding teams or the startups. Because unlike software, when you pass through a one-way door, in the physical world, it's usually very expensive. You just can't switch being, oh, I'm going to build this on my own. Well, it's costing me a lot. I'm going to now just buy this off the shelf.
Yeah.
It will require probably a re architecture of a lot of things. And usually it's extremely expensive. So that's an important lens to look at the product plans of companies.
That reminds me, and it's kind of why I think also, which is the micromobility spin out is so interesting because there was a lot of interesting stuff. I got a behind the scenes look and got to test the bikes and clearly very vertically integrated. But I don't know if it would have been a very expensive vertical integration had Rivian not existed, if also had been the first product, you know?
That's a really, really good point. And I think probably the main reason why so many attempts in the micromobility space have failed or not been winners, in the grand scheme of things, because I can see why a founder in the micromobility space has reached certain decisions where they start building out with great ideas. I'm going to re architect this. Oh my God, it's going to take a lot of money to vertically integrate all of this. What can I get off the shelf? When you start doing that, then all you're doing is just recreating what is already there because these off the shelf parts arranged in slightly different manners are not going to result in differentiating performance on the ground. And therefore, you see basically everything reverts to the mean in terms of technology. And I know you've spent a lot of time in this space, and there's no differentiation between five, six different existing products because they're all using the same suppliers. They're all
Right.
using the same designs. And unfortunately, it's a result of just not being able to break that cycle of building something on your own and capitalizing that and then creating a differentiation. And you're right, also had that benefit being incubated inside Rivian and leveraging a lot of that, I would say, ground up technology with the scale of Rivian, allowing it to then be adapted for a micromobility platform. And the result is now you have differentiated products with unique proprietary designs, but at scaled economics, which really makes the entire package much more viable from a price point of view and a performance point of view.
Well, and Rivian was an incubator for another spin out recently, which Eclipse also invested in Mind Robotics. And I'm wondering how many more of these companies Rivian is going to produce and that Eclipse is going to invest in.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Your
I've
pause,
spent,
by the way, makes me think that there are more coming. I just want to say.
there are lots of ideas. I
Yeah.
think, I've spent 10 years, maybe 12 years with RJ building and scaling Rivian, and there was never a shortage of ideas. It was about what is the right focus at a given point of time. And, again, taking a step back, Kirsten, it's very difficult to bucket a company like Rivian as an automotive company. To me, the lines are getting blurred between a product, between call it autonomy and automation and robotics. Because if you look at a manufacturing facility of a company like Rivian, it's like a mini city. You have 5,000 people working there. There are 2,000 old school robots that are deployed over there. But if you have to really go down the cost and price curve in the automotive industry, you have to meaningfully take out costs from the system. And the only way to do that without having the ability to use a Chinese supply chain is to automate and is to bring more, I would say, replacement of human hours with machines, which means you need to build the dexterity, you need to build reasoning, and that technology now exists in form of AI. Does that mean that every automotive company is going to be a robotics company? I think it's a great question. If you really want to sell products at great economics, like cars that drive on their own, but also are built with great economics, you're not going to do that by the same cars being built with lots of humans. That's the fact. And the question is, who has the skills, the capabilities, the, I would say, entrepreneurial vision to take these kind of big risks and build it? And I think, with RJ, we do find that he has that very broad set of shoulders to take these big risks on.
You're investing in certainly other companies besides just spinouts of Rivian. And I'm curious about what you're looking at in terms of industrial automation. Physical AI is a term that we hear thrown around quite a bit. You just mentioned robotics. What has really struck your interest right now in this point of time as really a space that has the most possibility? Because industrial automation has been around for quite some time. Robotics has been pursued for quite some time. But in this moment right now, what do you see is worthy placing bets on?
Yeah, we could go on for a long time on this. I'll just start with the environment that we are in right now because it informs why we believe in a certain thesis. And the environment that we are in right now, without taking a political position, the reality is that the next 15 to 20 years is going to be about deglobalization. It's going to be about decoupling the US economy with other economies, especially China. It means that we will not get the advantages of the globalized world that we are just coming out of, where you could access the labor availability and the labor costs in China for products that are being sold in the US. That's not going to happen.
Mhm.
So if that's the environment, the question becomes great. We are in this reindustrialization in the US. We're going to bring a lot of jobs back to the US. We're going to manufacture. We're going to build our own supply chain. But we can't do that using the same paradigm that China operated in, where they had all this labor, where they had this low cost of capital, where they had these subsidies from the government. So the way to level the playing field is technology. The way to level the playing field is aggressive use of artificial intelligence, use of automated machines that can perform at the same level of efficacy as humans, but at a factor less of a cost structure. That's what I think is very exciting for us, that if the environment is given, if we can anchor on that, which I do believe we can anchor on, then the automation that you're talking about and what we have seen is not going to be enough. You need to build in a lot more intelligence and a lot more dexterity and start replacing those tasks. And then the second question is that what do you need to build massive scale automation? You need compute, which is why we are seeing this massive investment in the compute infrastructure. We need energy. You need a complete transformation of the energy infrastructure within the country. And I think if you put these themes together, it forms the foundation of a lot of our investment thesis today.
You talk about that in the next 15, 20 years, what that status will be. And I think of what the economy will look like when you reach that. And when I say the economy, I mean the US economy and what the workforce looks like. And it will look really different, I think, than what it does today. And if I'm following you correctly, you would see maybe more job growth or potential job growth in, data center infrastructure and compute infrastructure and, developers, but perhaps fewer humans on factory floors because, maybe they're for assistance, but really the job growth is going to be in the development of these products as opposed to, working within factories. Is that how you see it? And how do we get through that? Because that seems like it's going to be a difficult transition. Technology is exciting, but it would be a big change.
It's an amazing, thought provoking topic because, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she asked what will she do when she grows up? And I sometimes have to pause because the answers I give her were not the answers my parents gave me,
Yeah.
because they won't apply. I feel that 100, 200 years from now, if somebody is looking at the history books, they're going to be like, wow, the human race, they used technology to industrialize the world. And they manufactured a lot of things, they consumed a lot of things, they moved around. And then they had a technology revolution where they reindustrialized in a way where they removed all those jobs and they made machines do all of that. It's going to be a blip in time if you look at it in like a 200-300 year time frame where we sort of industrialize in a certain way and then reindustrialize in a certain way. And I think what's going to happen in the fullness of time is humans would be doing things more that they want to do versus they have to do. You know, there will be so much of automation that will be part of our lives that maybe the scarcity of food and water and clean air, think the basic needs are going to be solved, with this next wave of reindustrialization, giving back time to the human race to pursue their other interests and passions. I think it is going to be a very different world, definitely in the next generation. But if you look at 2, 3 generations from now, that would look completely alien to the way we are living today.
Yeah, I sort of wonder how that will change. I mean, I can think of a million ways it would change the way we live, but specifically the day to day life in Silicon Valley. I wonder what Silicon Valley will look like because I meet so many people and founders whose life and where they get all of their, I guess, energy is through thinking of new ideas and launching companies. So, what are those other pursuits? Will that change? I don't know.
Where do you derive your energy from? Is it in building stuff? Is it in, I don't know, enjoying the outdoors, enjoying nature, enjoying time with the family? And I think there will be a rebalance of even how energy is being derived from these different sources for sure. I'm not sure if VCs will remain as part of this future as well. Who knows? You know, uh, Depending on how artificial intelligence scales, a lot of it can be done through these AI tools. And it will be interesting to see how all sectors, especially the Silicon Valley favorites, evolve over the next couple of decades.
In the next year or so, the next generation of founders, what do you really want to get pitched next?
The next 5 years, if I look at it, there's going to be one big change that will become extremely obvious. And to me, that change is that autonomy is going to be real and something that we can touch and feel. That's going to be a game changer for a lot of sectors. How our food moves, how our packages move, how we move. And I think it's going to be this magical moment where you get the first experience of what it means to get your time back, because we are so accustomed to, as a society, to spend time driving a vehicle, and the world moves on that. And I think that magical moment is going to be the trigger for all the things that we talked about, where we're going to start believing in more automation and what it means as a society to do with, when you get your time back, what you do with it. So I'm really excited about that. And I think what I enjoy my time right now is meeting founders who believe in that transition that's happening in the near term and how they're thinking of building on that to take the society and the economy to the next frontier. So that I think is what gives me the most energy at this point.
Got it. Thanks. So, where can our listeners connect with you or find you online?
I am on pretty plugged in on LinkedIn. It's a great tool to stay connected real time, and it's the best and the easiest way to reach out with any ideas. If you want to build a company in the physical world, I think we can have a great discussion around it.
Great. Well, I'm sure you'll get lots of messages now. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today. And to our listeners, you can always find us at Equity Pod on X and Threads.